Greetings, my internet friends. I began speaking here with just this idea of a framework in my mind that I'm just talking, and whatever comes up within that is admissible. That's my parameter here for 4 hours. And in these pauses here, I would say that I feel something like difficulty about what I'm going to say next, but as soon as I find myself saying something, a solution to that difficulty is indicated, which is simply narrating that difficulty resolves the difficulty, because it immediately provides content. And I would say that I'm observing a slightly halting pattern of talking so far, which I imagine will smooth itself out as we progress along. Here again, in this pause immediately preceding what I'm saying now, I again perceived that same difficulty, which would tend to counter what I just said about the difficulty resolving itself, because in that pause I remember thinking that I could simply repeat the same thing that I had said with regards to a previous lapse of talking, and it would still be true. But I also thought that a total repetition like that would somehow be counter to the spirit of this process. However, I've found that what I have proceeded to say with regards to that similar feeling of difficulty the second time around has actually been quite different than what I said the first time around. And it even was longer in duration, as in there was more content the second time around. And it seems as if I can keep appending onto the same train of thought further descriptions of it that are only becoming valid as I'm saying, the immediately preceding appendix or whatever. Like, the last thing that I said is is generating some new relevance, if you will, or a new observation or something like that. It just requires paying a certain kind of attention to the most recent thing that I said and trying to sort out verbally what like how to articulate what exactly it was that I said. Now, let me clarify a little bit. It's not, I don't mean to say that I'm saying the same thing that I just said, but I'm saying something about the thing that I just said. And so that process just involves, I suppose, deciding what to say about whatever it is that is the object of my attention, which for the past little bit has tended to be the most recent thing that I've said, although I also realize that that needn't be the only object of attention. For instance, the object could also be some greater duration of things that I have said, and those options become wider the longer that we proceed here, as in the longer that we proceed here, the more has been said within this framework. And so my options for what to say can also include more overall types of assessments of what's been said so far. And also assessments of what seems to be going on right now, or well, in what it is that I perceive to be right now, because I am realizing that if I'm making an assessment of what's going on right now, I'm also finding that that's also the same as kind of linguistically defining what right now is. And also realizing that in some sense, everything that's being referred to, even just for example, parts of time, which, for example, when I talked about the most recent thing that's been said, or the longer duration of things that have been said, or the present moment, or maybe, for example, like the most immediate segment of time that I can perceive. All these parts of time that I have been referring to in talking about the things that I've said or am saying, are beginning to reveal themselves as being a little bit more of linguistic constructs that I'm creating in the present moment, so to speak, present moment with obviously scare quotes around it, because again, the present moment has multiple different interpretations, I would say. And if I'm being honest and looking for an objective present moment, I don't feel certain that I'm even experiencing one. Other than something that's sort of a referent or a construct from that is referred to by all these other parts of time that I'm referring to, as in it seems like the present moment would only really exist as kind of something that's implicated by the ideas of these other parts of time, like the past or the immediate past or the immediate future or the longer future, etc. And I don't, of course, we kind of know what that means. The present moment, like it would seem almost logical to, it would seem almost obvious to say, I'm speaking these words in the present moment, and it seems like I understand what that statement means and you understand what that statement means, but if I think about it, it's not as if I could actually perceive that only in the present moment. As in, it's not as if my understanding of that statement, or even my comprehension, or even my perception of that statement occurs in the present moment. Because I mean, even the sound itself, it's like, let's say there's I suppose, like, if you want to be kind of rigorous about what the definition of the present moment, it means an infinitely thin sliver of time, right? That is the present moment. It's infinitely thin. And so it would have exactly zero extent in time. In a way, it's kind of like a zero-dimensional object. Like it has exactly no extent, has exactly no duration. And the question begs is like, even the word now has duration and has extent, and if you were to take any infinitely thin sliver of the duration of time that it takes to say the word now, that sliver would not contain any information. It wouldn't contain any sound even. I mean, let's just keep going with the sake of, for the sake of argument, let's just keep going with this assumption that time is, we're continually moving through time directionally, and we're continually we're continually in this infinitely thin sliver of time that is the present, and we're just constantly moving forward. Then even something like let alone the conception of language, even something as seemingly fundamental as the perception of sound can only be kind of an agglomeration of or a sort of contraction of a duration of time, as in infinitely many of these infinitely thin slivers of the present moment. So even something like sound perception is some kind of contraction of time, and then necessarily so something like the comprehension of language is an even larger contraction, or a contraction of even larger duration of time for something like understanding to occur. And so, is there some point at which that contraction occurs in time? I can't perceive a point at which I can't perceive a specific point at which like, for instance, the hearing occurs. But at the same time, as some sort of like as some sort of like shorthand description, it doesn't seem wrong to say that I'm hearing, and it doesn't seem wrong to say that I'm understanding the language that I'm speaking, and obviously I can say with absolute certainty that you are understanding the language that I'm speaking. And I don't mean necessarily that you are perfectly comprehending what some overall truth or observation or overall statement that's being said here. I just mean that you are decoding the language, which I can say with absolute certainty. Because if you weren't, then you wouldn't be understanding what I just said, and the communication would not have been made. The communication of that particular concept that you are understanding what I'm saying would not be occurring if you weren't understanding what I was saying. I mean, it's just kind of a tautology. Anyhow, I can remark of what's been said so far, that all these things have flowed from a point of not knowing what to say. I mean, I'm not gonna pretend that these are something like completely spontaneous or original thoughts. Almost certainly not. But I'm just saying that within the time frame of speaking that's going on, whatever is being communicated is contiguous with what I remember of the beginning of this video. Which was something like just stating this framework of simply speaking, and whatever is spoken is admissible. But of course, I would grant you that there's not really something like objectivity in this process, and that it's not as if stating that framework would somehow distance me from my subjectivity and my patterns of thinking and speaking, and my inclinations and proclivities, etc., from affecting the content of what is said, whether consciously or unconsciously. Indeed, as I go on here, I do become aware of how things that I am saying are in a way not originating from anything like some present moment of creativity or something like that, but I am seeing how they relate to things that I've thought or heard or read in the past, and things that I've said in the past. And as I see that, it seems as if aspects or things that I would associate with being myself, or being constituent parts of myself, you know, especially thoughts and ideas, things that it seems like I would have ordinarily thought of as originating kind of in the present moment from whatever the center of me is, or whatever the center of my free will would be, as in I'm creating and generating those thoughts. I mean, that's what I'm presently assuming that my default world model would be, or self model would be, or metaphysical model would be. That is of a self that can originate thought in the present moment. But instead I'm seeing everything that I'm saying as being connected to things that are to a varying extent external to myself. That is, if I think of my past self who has thought these ideas before, the more distant in time my model of that past self is, the more removed I consider it from my real self, which I would be considering the present self. As in, just for example, it's easy to think of things, think of ideas and proclivities one held 10 or 20 years ago, and feel distance from those ideas and proclivities and the self that they supposedly constituted, as being naive, we know better now, etc. But also that I can see a pretty clear connection with all the things that I'm saying and things that have been said or thought or written by other people. And just, to the extent that it's not really possible to single out anything that I'm saying as like originating purely within me. At best it's it's like me is kind of some cauldron, some kind of stew. And what would seem to be what would seem to be originality would just be a stew that's been simmering for longer. That is more thoroughly integrating ideas from disparate external sources. But also on the same token, all these ideas, no matter how well integrated or simmered, are always referring to an external world, even if it's or referring to something else, even if it's referring to something like internal world or referring to something like consciousness. Whatever it be, the idea seems as dependent on something external to the would-be originator as it is on the originator, and more of something like a bridge between internal and external than anything like a pure reflection of internal. Furthermore, any ideation, insofar as it's even registered as such, seems to be sensible in a manner that at least has the potential for communication to other subjectivities, as in all of this ideation that's going on now, even, you know, while on one level is very explicitly being recorded and shared, obviously. I mean, it's a tautological truth that this ideation is shared with you. Via this particular medium. But even on a more fundamental level, the ideation itself, which I'm suggesting is very inextricably entwined with perception itself, is occurring in kind of an intersubjective format, as in ideation, as insofar as it is registered, is sensible in a way that has the potential to be shared, whether it is actually shared or not. As in, in other words, the forms in which I can perceive, which, and by perception I am including my perception of the quote-unquote external world, as well as my perception of my quote-unquote internal world, my perception of my own thought world or imaginary world, whatever. Those forms are those forms of perception are I'm saying, like, fundamentally common to other people. I mean, I guess I'm questioning that they're probably not actually universally common to other people, and almost definitely not universally common to other animals and other life forms. So to append what I said, they're definitely, my perception is definitely far from universal to even all people. I mean, as evidenced by the particularity of the language that I'm speaking. However, it seems like almost everything that I perceive is common to at least some people. And why I'm saying that is because I'm saying that my perception is influenced by my conception, which has everything to do with my finding utility in the world. As in, if I'm perceiving a rock, it means I'm conceiving a rock. If I can't conceive a rock, it's questionable to say whether it's true that I actually perceive a rock. And the fact that I can and do conceive of a rock indicates and is caused by the fact that the concept of a rock has utility to myself. And even and just for example, even the my perceived properties of a rock, or all the properties that I can perceive of in a rock. So something like weight, you know, like weight implying this direct relation to my body, or the conceptual category of mass as being mass ostensibly being a more objective term that's less related to my own body per se, and less related to the other object that's creating the gravitational pull on the rock or the object or whatever it is, and giving it weight, which is, you know, weight being relational, being relative to a gravitational pull exerted by another object with mass. But the concept of mass having a relative degree of relatively less relativity. However, the concept of mass is kind of like a it's something like a rule of nature, or a law of nature, that could be said to be encompassing or organizing large amalgamations of percepts. Percepts of the behavior of objects like rocks, and how they exhibit weight in relation to each other and in relation to the perceived self and the body. And that fundamentally being a mode of utility towards a mode of utility for the self, as in things like weight and mass are instrumental types of percepts and concepts for the survival and proliferation of the perceiver and conceiver. And that relation of utility has a certain there's a certain symmetry between what's thought of as external and what's thought of as internal to the perceiver. As in, for instance, just trying to speak in my case, then it certainly seems like the survival of this particular form of subjectivity that I seem to be experiencing, that is something like, the human experience, and then more specifically my individual human experience, seems predicated upon the maintenance of various equilibriums of the body, maintenance of the body basically, and the maintenance of its corporal boundaries and its internal equilibriums. But the maintenance of those equilibriums is inextricably linked with the external world, as in something like hunger occurs, and hunger is, you can say it's an internal state, of course, but it's also a state that is strongly indicating something in the external world, meaning it's going to shape my behavior towards the end of rectifying that disequilibrium by eating something that is, acceptable as food, that will go in and maintain the equilibrium. And that's kind of a physiological example, but there's things like that are not physiological, but you could say mental or conceptual, and related to a somewhat more abstract conception of self or identity, that in which I would say that the survival of this identity of my perceiving self, the perceiver, is also predicated on certain mental abstractions, like beliefs about the world, or beliefs about myself, and or like representations of myself through others' eyes and so forth. So kind of both like seemingly internally held ideas or thoughts, as well as projections of myself through other subjectivities. And so these things all contributing to a construct or a complex that kind of seems like the self, and that wants to survive. And all that stuff is predicated on doing certain things or maintaining certain things that are a little bit more abstract than just the physiological aspects of staying alive. However, I can observe that these somewhat more abstract aspects of self come and go, or at least I can think of, I can conceive of a self that has continuity, that is the physical self that was born and has persisted through reality for a duration up till the present moment, has gone through many changes. Of course, now that I think about it, has gone through drastic physiological changes, and of course, you've heard this before, that the matter that composes our body is kind of gone through every 7 years. That is to say, you have none of the same matter composing your body as you did 7 years ago. But also, of course, I can see how the more mental types of constructs that have constituted, that have been aspects of myself, have come and gone, and some of them died away in the course of what I'm thinking of as the continuity of my physical self. Well, but then I can go further and ask myself, to what extent is this physical continuity real and evident beyond it being a concept. That I am presently holding. To what extent is my past objectively real versus something that is drawn forth from memories that are recalled in the present. I mean, that seems obvious, but then we have to say that memories do have some at least correspondence with some at least intersubjectively agreed upon past, as in many of my memories will corroborate with other people's memories. And so indeed there's definitely intersubjectivity. I'm feeling like I want to say that the things that are being said almost seem so removed from some idea of a present moment. They're so dependent on this web of concepts that it seems as if everything that I say is really dependent on a whole host of assumed concepts that once I start to investigate them, they don't seem inherently true or something like that. And that even the act of speaking at all is always engaging in, it could even be said, reifying a whole conceptual framework that mostly kind of seems true. It mostly kind of seems true like when it's not investigated or not looked at directly. It seems true like in the peripheral. As in whatever is the object of our focus at any given time, whether it be true or false or substantive or a construct or empty or not, whatever it is it's related to, it's always kind of implying all these other truths that when examined themselves, they have no inherent substance to them. They themselves are also completely dependent on a bunch of other supposed truths, and so on and so forth. Like, as if all of knowledge and even all of experience is like constituted of this infinitely complex web of things that don't themselves have any existence. Like everything that seems to exist is just made out of non-existence. That like the existent itself is exactly non-existence. Which it keeps that keeps kind of like bearing true in my observation. But what I mean by bearing true also means bearing false, as in always coming up empty-handed as the result of getting the closest to something fundamental. As in when I perceive something that seems real, like for instance myself and my body, and it's my unavoidable needs, my unavoidable physical limitations, for instance. The fact that I cannot just jump off a cliff and be all right, and I can't just will whatever I want into material existence and so forth. In observing that reality, which is maybe almost synonymous with limitation, as in, like for instance, I'm limited to and by my body, or limited to and by my perspective. It's like those limitations are completely necessary for me to even experience something like a body, or experience something like a perspective at all. Like, it wouldn't be possible to I don't think would be possible to experience something like being everything. Like, you know, it's like the body. And so, you know, I'll of course there's problems with saying that I am my body or something, and of course we can deconstruct that, whatever. But just remarking upon the limitations of my body, it means that experientially I'm not the world. I'm perceiving a world that there's some sort of limitation to what I'm able to perceive of as myself and what I'm able to perceive of as not myself. There's some kind of it seems like there's some kind of division, just insofar as, like, I have to eat food and drink water and have air, and I have to sleep and all that sort of thing, and keep a reasonable temperature, and etc. But also that I cannot access your interiority. I cannot access the specifics of your experience. I cannot access, like, the form of your perspective. That is, I cannot see the content of it, other than, actually, to be honest, at this moment, I have an idea of what, at least, I have an idea of at least one of the aspects of the content of your experience right now, which is this. But I can't experience what it is like to be everything that I can perceive as having subjectivity, or not having subjectivity, as the case may be. And that's necessary. That's necessary to have any experience at all. There has to be limitation for there to be experience. There has to be separation. For there to be perception, the perceiver, the perceived, and perception. There has to be there has to be this limitation in order for anything to be perceived or conceived as something like some kind of whole, or something larger than the self. So anything like an objective reality needs the limitation of a perceiver, or the limitation of a conceiver, to have anything that you could think of really as an existence. And so of course there might be this conflict in your mind. Well, of course you and I can imagine a world with no perceivers, or a world with no life is certainly imaginable, but then you have to pay attention to the fact that it is exactly being imagined. Within our subjectivities. Something that it is not actually coherent even to propose the actual existence of something that is completely independent of sensation or conception. And we have to admit that even the worlds are parts of worlds that we can imagine or conceive of, or even propose as existing, or even propose as theoretically possible, are extrapolations from our own sensible world. They're extrapolations from what has been sensed. But what I was actually getting at was just kind of another way to say that when I said the extant is exactly non-existence or emptiness, if you will. It's kind of like emptiness is equivalent to the whole of reality. And when I say reality, I'm defining it as everything that is real, whether that be external or internal, objective or subjective, that there definitionally is nothing external to reality. Because if there's something external to reality that is real, then it belongs within the category of reality. So definitionally, there's nothing outside of reality. But also, in order to perceive or conceive anything like reality, any reality at all, requires a limited perspective. And when I say limited perspective, it's that's kind of redundant, because any perspective is necessarily limited. Any perspective implies the existence, or at least potential existence, of other perspectives that belong in the same world as the originating perspective. As in, if I have any perspective at all, which I do, it's necessarily a perspective onto a world which must include other perspectives, or at least other potential perspectives. That belong to the same world. I mean, this seems just so obvious that it's like I'm not saying anything at all. Like you would say, you would say, you know, this is kind of just so obvious that the way the world is, the way that reality is, that you're not saying anything, you're not imparting anything, and I would agree. But from this perspective, it seems like I can sort of almost conceive of the reality. You know, I can't, obviously I can't, I can't in a meaningful sense experience all of reality. But I can I can kind of model it. I can think about it, and I can relate my perspective to it, to what I think it might be. But I can't finally grasp it. That's just not. It's a contradiction in terms. It would to actually grasp reality is definitionally impossible. And what I mean by grasp is not to model. I think it is theoretically possible to model reality, but modeling is not the same as like completely apprehending or perfectly experiencing with or perceiving every aspect of it, as in no model of reality could, for instance, authoritatively determine all of the form of that reality. I mean, that's it, that idea in itself is incoherent. The idea of knowing all of reality is also incoherent. Because if you could know all of reality, would be the equivalent of being all of reality. There would be, because it would have to include absolutely every aspect of objective and subjective, to the point where there would the known would leave absolutely no room left for the knower. And if the knower is gone, then the known is also gone. And then again, you're back at non-existence. And non-existence is exactly what it means. It doesn't exist. It's so non-existent that it makes existence. Essentially, this is non-existence. Like this reality that exists, that that you and I are experiencing right now. And you can see that. You can see how That which exists doesn't. Know what I'm saying? That that which seems is exactly not. It's just not. And yet it still seems. I mean, and but this is not to denigrate the seeming part. Not necessarily to denigrate it to the status of illusion. More of like that all of reality is like provisional. And it's always passing, you know? But not just temporally, but in every other sense too. But I mean, even just looking at the temporal, that there is time at all is like an expression of emptiness being form. That you can never actually grasp any moment. I'd almost say that you can't ever actually even be in any moment. But you can sort of, it's like any moment is like indirectly discernible in the peripheries of time. Like something seemed like it existed a little bit ago, and it sure seems like something's gonna keep existing, or something will exist in the next moment here. And there's some sort of like rough amalgamation of impressions or something that seems to kind of fuzzily constitute the present moment. But I can't nail any of them down for sure. I can only anytime I try to nail down some extant property or aspect of a present moment, I find that it's interdependent on all this host of other impressions or conceptions or perceptions or assumptions that themselves are not inherently existent, but dependent on other stuff, that itself depends on other stuff, etc., etc. It's like the transience of everything is just emptiness expressing itself. Through form. That form is like definitionally transient. Even if we can sort of conceive platonically of forms that are transcendent of time. But then again, that's requires like active conception, and the conception itself is transient. But this is at the point where it all feels simultaneously plainly obvious, and kind of like irresolvable. Which means, in a sense, I feel stupid saying these things, because I'm at once saying something that is so obvious it doesn't need to be said, and at the same time, everything that I'm saying is incomplete in a way. I mean, of course, it's necessarily incomplete. And now I sort of have to remind myself that the whole premise of what I'm doing here was never to elucidate anything, and it seems like in this process of speaking, I sort of unconsciously have come under this notion that it would be possible to say something about reality that would have some kind of explanatory use. And have been like, sort of seems like I've been going on under that assumption as kind of a framework for generating more content, as in like taking on a posture that I might be explaining something of reality to you, that you might be able to learn something from this, was implied by the posture of the things that I was saying. And so now I can recognize that sort of like unconscious framework of explanation coming up as a type of perspective, like a type of framework around the sorts of things that I've been saying that is helpful in continuing to generate content, just generate language. And even if the general understanding of the things that I've been saying to some extent might vitiate the significance of language, or vitiate the any inherent truth of language, or inherent meaningfulness of concepts as expressed in language. Nonetheless, it was in some sense shaping or kind of like implicitly implying something of like a edifying possibility, which now I'm just saying is one limited perspective. The saying that the possibility for edification implies a certain structure to reality, namely that for instance, that there's a self that can somehow like objectively learn more of objective reality and like understand it better, and thus kind of like constructing a form of utility. That's what could be said of the nature of many of the things that I have been saying, could be said to be engaging in the construction of a type of utility and construction of a sort of a type of subjectivity or a a directionality for subjectivity, which, you know, is perfectly normal and to be expected when, especially when subjectivity itself requires perspective and requires directionality and requires in a sense, like, not only does it have the specific needs, like the in this case the need to like know something, or to have the need to think it understands things, but the state of subjectivity requires utility, as in order to be subjective, in order to have any subjectivity or have experience itself, like you need to have a need for something. You need to have needs, as in the separation between self and other, internal and external. The separation also requires that this kind of relationship, that of needing something from the outside world in order to be able to perceive the outside world. As in, like I said before, the fact that I can perceive something like a rock is indicative of the category of rock, or the even the more general category of like object with mass, having generally a utility towards my perspective. And so that's why I'm saying it's like it's kind of natural, like insofar as you and I have this human experience to perceive some kind of utility and knowledge generally, or maybe it's even like type of utility, I'm saying utility very broadly speaking, of aesthetic experience even. As in I mean, that you are watching this right now would indicate that you perceive some sort of utility, broadly speaking, or potential utility in this act of viewing or hearing this. The notion that there might be something here for you, even however kind of nebulously defined that might be. There might be something here for you, what may it be, like something that's intellectually or aesthetically or emotionally expanding or just fueling or pleasing or entertaining or whatever it is. So I'm suggesting that, well, that nothing really. I'm not really suggesting anything. But I can kind of think of, I can kind of like suggest a type of meta utility that this might have for me, if you will, as in, at least ostensibly my framework here is that I just am requiring myself to talk continuously for a 4-hour duration, and the content of that can be whatever it is, and is not necessitated to like have any specific type of utility to me or to you, as in what I say, at least ostensibly, theoretically, it's not required to be informative or edifying or beautiful or entertaining or even necessarily coherent, although I'll say probably another parameter that is in employ here, whether I've stated it or not, is that the language that I'm using is kind of ordinary English syntax, as in I'm speaking in coherent sentences. I'm just like speaking normally, as opposed to like free associative poetry or something like that. And so it could be said that even that willingness to continue speaking in you know, more or less coherent English statements that conform to syntactical and grammatical rules, could be said to be implying a certain form of reality that may not necessarily be it doesn't inherently take precedence over other potential realities that that would not necessitate like logical propositional statements, or well, not necessarily that this is all propositional, but that the proper English syntax is implying a certain is implying some things about reality. So that is another form of like limitation on this, whether it's explicit or implicit. But it's kind of interesting to see that staying within those boundaries, what becomes implied that might lie outside of the boundaries. And like this, I would say is kind of like analogous to the limitation of our individual perspectives, as in to be limited to our individual selves is in some way very miraculous, in that it's only by being limited to that perspective that we are able to perceive everything else, or to conceive or to imagine everything else. Including other subjectivities or other like potential forms of reality and shapes of reality, to be able to just, for example, try to like imagine the forms of subjectivity for like a dragonfly or something. Or a computer, or a mosquito, or a virus, or a person from a very different culture, or whatever, or an extraterrestrial, or a cloud of gas, or a coffee cup, or whatever. But, of course, like, not only just to be able to imagine other subjectivities, but merely just to observe the world. And for this, like, possibility of discovery, whether that be discovering something externally or internally. Either way, the fact that you're limited to your perspective is necessary. Limitation is necessary for any of the aspects of experience that we would seem to value. I mean, and the ones that we don't value as well, to be honest. Let's not, I'm not trying to like send you a positive message exactly. But I mean, I suppose as I'm thinking about this, it does seem in some sense like it's like this is at least welcome, you know? That the limitations of experience, it's just incoherent to like reject anything about that. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't know if it doesn't necessarily like logically, well, maybe it does. I'm questioning whether, you know, the things that I'm saying, would it logically follow that it's incoherent to like reject certain forms, certain aspects of one's experience. Not necessarily. I think you can still reject things if you want to. But now I feel like I'm getting now I feel like I'm straying into like trying to like stretch this into like some kind of like advice or like perspective about positivistic thinking, or not necessarily not positive, but positive psychology. Which I don't know about. Good, how are you? Hi. So to return to something that I started before and didn't finish, which was like trying to, well, that I can perceive, as I called it, a type of meta utility to this activity, in that ostensibly I'm permitting all talking, regardless of its specific utility, or theoretically whether it has utility or not to me, then, and for a relatively long duration of time, then maybe it's like the overarching utility would be that by framing all this, by framing this duration of relatively relatively undirected talking, as in like relatively free of certain constraints or relatively free of certain forms of utility, then perhaps some kind of perhaps it could lead towards some types of higher insights about the nature of utility itself, or like perceived utility in itself, and to allow some of those modes of perceived utility to be seen past or seen through as being not fundamental, but kind of co-generated with my subjectivity, co-generated by the limitation of my experience. And then, so, you know, this like type of meta utility that I'd speak of could be something like a broader, more transcendent perspective on the mechanisms of selfhood, or something like that. I don't know, but still, even as I do it, it's kind of paradoxical in that, like, would be higher insights that I would tend to have imply the absence of the hierarchy of insight. As in, just for example, I spent a long time talking about the impossibility of something like knowing all of reality, the necessity of limitation. How even like any would-be organization of knowledge is or like any conception of how there would be this hierarchy of knowledge is like necessarily like co-created with the specific, co-created with specific forms of my subjectivity. Like that there's that there's like some kind of symmetry there. Some kind of symmetry between between even the most overarching like systems that I would project onto the reality that I perceive. And the sort of like how I draw the boundaries of myself, like where I'm drawing the lines of my system with which I organize external reality, have this symmetry with the way that I draw the lines around myself. And thus the kind of like lines of the forms of my perception of reality that I'm saying are conceptual. But even when I say the word conceptual, the conceptual is like inextricable with the perceptual. I mean, and just like, for instance, there's been neurological studies that are suggesting that even our acts of perceiving, for instance, the visually, our visual perception, are not coming from the bottom up, as in like they're not so much like objectively perceiving the world around you and then being organized into conceptions. There's actually even more like top-down action occurring, as in your priors about the world are actually shaping your percepts, as in the fact that I know what a rock is, that I have this abstract concept of rocks, that even if it is an amalgamation of seeing thousands of rocks in my lifetime, then but it's still like that concept is strongly mediating my actual visual perception when I think that I'm seeing a rock. And that just kind of like it's just kind of like illustrating that anything that I might be saying or thinking that would seem to be constituting something like knowledge, whether it be knowledge about the external world or knowledge about myself, it's still essentially propositional knowledge, or suggesting objectivity, or suggesting the world is just as much indicative of the form of my perspective and the form of myself and the form of my perception, as it is like contributing to and shaping my perspective. And of course, there are other factors and limitations upon that, as in I cannot just willfully decide to like alter my perception into that of an eagle, and kind of then effectively experientially become an eagle. Any more than I can I willfully choose to just perceive into reality a donut tree. Because these realities, I'm just suggesting both external and internal, have also been shaped by other perceivers. And are being shaped by other perceivers. And that again, these limitations are necessary for the existence of any subjective or objective aspect of reality. Then, necessary for any reality at all, as in there seems to be this continuity of the limitations, as in laws of nature are consistent, and I have no ability to defy any law of nature, because if there weren't these consistencies, what I'm saying is a law of nature basically is a consistency in experience. Basically is a type of continuity. It's like what they are. And without that, they're just would not be any reality. Of course, we can imagine. I can sort of imagine some other reality in which we can all will into existence a donut tree or whatever we want, or willfully turn into an eagle. But if I think a little bit more about the implications of that, it starts to fall apart as a coherent model of reality, because there would be basically no ground from which to discern something like selfhood or any continuity. There'd be no ground from which to for there to be any perceptions, stable or fluctuating as they may be. Just for example, like if one was willfully able to transform into whatever form you wanted, where would be like the basis? How would there be any basis to form that will to transfer into anything? How would something like any identity exist? Like you would be born, and every single whim that you would have would throw the form of your existence into a flux, and the form of your existence would dictate the form of your perception, which would then dictate the shape of your reality as perceived. And there would be no continuity. For instance, if you are, like it is incoherent for me to conceive of transforming into an eagle, because where would the actual continuity between me and the eagle be? Like the eagle's, for one thing, the eagle's brain is so different than my brain that how would the memories that would constitute the continuity be retained? Like an eagle, I'm saying, could for certain not contain all the memories of a human. First of all, because like the memories are kind of dependent in continuity of like the form of your body and the structure of your nervous system and all of that. Like for me to like remember being an eagle, I can have some kind of imagination of flying in the air, but really that's kind of what I'm actually imagining there is like me flying there as like a human, or like a human like temporarily inside of an eagle's body. But I like to actually like imagine really transforming into another form would necessarily require a total transforming of subjectivity, and identity just would not be preserved. Like if you were suddenly to become an eagle in the sky, that eagle has just, in order to be in the state of being an eagle in the sky, there's a certain form of subjectivity that's required that, you know, would also require like the eagle's memory of being an eagle and of like learning to fly and learning how to hunt, and as well as like, you know, whatever is just instinctual and like inextricable with the physiology of the eagle. Like you wouldn't, like the transformation into that would essentially like eliminate any continuity between you and the eagle, and there would be no memory. But and so like essentially, let's say as a thought experiment you did like fully transform into an eagle in the sky, a fully grown eagle flying in the sky. That state of being, as I just said, is like requires this whole identified state of subjectivity that would include this whole like memories and instincts of an eagle, and you would essentially be an eagle who has been born as an eagle and learned how to fly and had all these past experiences that constitute the present experience, that constitute your present being as an eagle, as an identity. And there would be no like I remember being a person in a former life or something. And essentially I'm suggesting that that's actually kind of how individuation works, in that like being in the state of subjectivity that you are right now necessitates this particular shape of your identity that includes all these memories of having been born. It's like in our same thought experiment, the eagle could have just transformed into you with all your memories and experiences that constitute your present state of having a human experience. And so it's like, since it's like effectively, there's effectively no continuity there. It's like, that's kind of how it works with like the relationship between the whole and the part, as in you could be said in this sort of like metaphorical sense that I'm talking about, one creature transforming into another creature to to in some sense like be related to the whole of reality in that sense, as in like to the extent that you are all of reality, including all shapes of subjectivity, your relationship to all the other forms of subjectivity is kind of like one of necessarily having forgotten, if you will. I mean, this is really getting like kind of metaphorically like fanciful. So take this all with a grain of salt. That state, as in, because that the state of your current subjectivity like requires your reality to be shaped a certain way, a very specific way, the way that it is shaped right now. And so it's like, it's kind of meaningless to say whether, you know, you have transformed into something else or something else has transformed into you. It's like you could or you could not have, it doesn't matter. And it's effectively not a substantial reality. And so like when I talk about the incoherence of like imagining this other world where we're free to will reality however we want it to be, when you kind of see the incoherence of that, then it follows perfectly natural the necessity of the continuity of natural laws and like the limitations on reality. Like reality has to have these limitations to be any reality at all, even though it's kind of as if these other realities can be implied by the specific way that reality is shaped. And they're all so implied that if, for instance, like, well, let's say that like that everything is so implied that if you added it all up, it would be nothing. Is in a sense that like the sum of all the boundaries is zero. Sort of like the sum of all possible universes is also zero, which is sort of like this idea of the multiverse is also itself incoherent, as in that the idea of the multiverse is that we're imagining that every other reality in which something happens slightly different sort of exists alongside of our universe, but we don't have access to it because we've like sort of the wave has collapsed for our subjectivity into this universe where things are specifically this way. The reason that this idea is incoherent is because the sort of categories of difference are undefined, as in how many times does this, when exactly does the universe split off into another universe? Is it only when a quantum physicist in a lab observes a photon materializing, like collapsing in one place as opposed to the other place? Is it so there's only as many universes as there are observed laboratory photon quantum experiments? Or is it like every time that I guess the implication would be any time that like any particle does anything, or any wave does anything, but at the same time that's all observer dependent, and like the that all depends on like what question the observer is asking, what framework through which the observer is observing. It's completely dependent on the shape of perception, and so it's so completely contingent and undefined what actually constitutes difference, because the difference is constituted by observation. That like the other universes in the multiverse lack any coherence, as in that it's like it's so fuzzy that it would all blur into nothing, as in like if you add up all the supposed other multiverses, it would get to nothing. As in like you can even talk about how the current single universe that we supposedly exist in is already, if according to the quantum physics that is being interpreted into the multiverse, the current single universe that we're in is already so ill-defined that you can't actually define this into a substantive universe, because like the very act of defining this universe requires is completely dependent on the observation and the form of observation and the question being asked and all of that. And just like as an example, you can just kind of think of you could think of the sorts of examples that people would use to when they're trying to describe this idea of the multiverse. So like somebody will have some examples. So for example, there's some universe in which we all have green skin, or that movie that I have a lot of qualms, scientific qualms, and like There's that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Sure, it's a joyous romp, but I think it is I think it is suggesting a profound misinterpretation of reality. This, like, just like, you know, like, oh, there's this other universe where we all have hot dogs for fingers, and then it's like, okay, and then also every universe where, like, one single atom is in a minutely different position, but then also all these other universes where the laws of nature are different. So, for instance, other universes where quantum mechanics don't exist, and that would be like universes to which there is no multiverse, or universes. And then the question is, like, even if you take any one of those, like where one atom is in a slightly different position, and then you examine, like, this proposition of an atom being in a slightly different position, and then, like, understand that the existence and the position of the atom are these observer dependent things, these measurement dependent things that depend on how somebody's measuring it, then it's like the existence of all these other universes then are also then, like, completely dependent on the like modes of perception and measurement from this universe. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, it's definitely just like sort of an imaginative romp, if you will. Anyhow, I guess going on a tirade like that is a good way to fill some time with talking. And so now I'm like, find myself trying to return to some primeval state of not knowing what I'm gonna say, as if I've just started, trying to return to some primeval beginner's mind, and I realize that that's a farce. That there is no beginner's mind. That every state is as primeval as any other. There's nowhere to get to here. But I mean, everything I say now seems equally cool and stupid. As in, And to whatever extent I may have unburdened myself from ideas that I could get somewhere, which this statement in itself is bullshit, because I can't actually unburden myself. I can't actually ever be free of notions of utility or directionality or perspectival direction. But, you know, just kind of continuing on in bullshit, maybe in some ways I can perceive something like a change in tone that is simultaneously completely skeptical of everything, but somewhat enjoying that. I feel like deeply aware of all the like farce of everything that I can, every aspect I can perceive about my talking, the implications, the postures, the tone, of course the content, you know, but anything that could be thought of as content, even if it be affective or whatever. But when I say I'm aware of the farce of that, I also feel aware of the farce of saying that I'm aware of the farce of anything, because it's not like I see something else more authentic beneath it. As in, even in this mode that I'm presenting here of like sort of categorically dismissing everything that's present in this communication, that includes the idea of dismissing everything. That includes, you know, that I'm skeptical of the possibility of being skeptical of everything. Or I'm skeptical of the posture of skepticism. That I ostensibly am demonstrating here, but then at this, because listen, my skepticism has bared fruit, and that on the other side of this, the implication of the posture of skepticism is that we're actually looking for the real reality, and so we're discarding everything that becomes revealed as untrue. Or as bullshit or whatever. So I was right to be skeptical of the skepticism itself, because the skepticism implies in some way, shape, or form an earnestness behind it. And where there is earnestness, there's bullshit. And where there's bullshit, there's the identifier of bullshit. Where there's bullshit, there's a person with a bullshit meter. And where there's a person with a bullshit meter, there's a person earnestly searching for the truth, which is bullshit. And this is fine. You could object to me and say, but Ben, there are modes of being that are not predicated on truth versus falsity. And I could say, yeah, but also also all this language that's ostensibly predicated on truth or falsity, bullshit versus earnestness, this dualistic language that constitutes like normal everyday thought for the human. The persistence in this dualistic mode can be read as total absurdity, absurdism. As in, you can say it's Dadaistic to continue in rationality. Because rationality vitiates itself. So does Dada. Dada is really just disguised rationality. It's just a meta-utilitarian ideology. In other words, to continue making sense is nonsensical. But nonsensicalness makes a type of sense. So then sort of the paradoxical dialogue between nonsensicalness and sensibility is itself both rational and irrational, or the paradoxical and irresolvable dialogue between form and emptiness is both the logical endpoint of rationality and is irrational. But then again, the irrationality is part of rationality. Like all these things necessitate each other and destroy each other. Like everything is here because there isn't anything. There's nothing to learn except different forms of limitation. There's nothing to learn except different shapes of ignorance. And that's fine. That's completely fine. It's fine, but it's not like great. It's not like great, we can be finished with this now. It's like, fine, this is completely endless. And that's fine. It's neither good nor bad. It's just completely endless. Like this way that your experience is, I don't mean like the specific transient forms of it, but that which all of those suggest and imply, the most overarching general state that your experience like this, that's endless. And don't get me wrong, not like the human experience, but just experience at all is completely endless. There's no end to this like state of subjectivity. But don't get me wrong, at the same time that it's endless, it's like not even real. It's not even it's real for eternity, but it's also not even here now. There's like not even anything here now. Like there's not even experience. And then at the same time it's like, oh, it seems like there's experience. Oh, that there's a possibility for anything to seem at all necessitates that there is experience and an experiencer and experienced, etc. And that's all. Yeah, that's all. Yeah. That there is an experience is an aspect of there being no experience. And I guess vice versa too. But Am I upholding the parameters of this exercise? Do I have to define the permissible length of gaps? By which we can still consider me to be talking? I feel excited because I feel as if I could possess the summer, and then I realize I can't possess the summer at any point. But it's fine to pretend. I'm going to pretend that I'm a person about to experience summer. I'll try here anyways. Where it seems like the adherence to the process of ordinary language has in a way self-vitiated, as in extinguishing the significance or the would-be significance of language, of ordinary language. Seemingly extinguishing the would-be utility of it, but also the would-be utility of it was not necessarily assumed from the beginning. However, in the process of speaking, as I'm now seeing just now, there is at least a type of relative transient utility that's kind of cast up in the relationship between different words and sentences. As in, if we took as a whole everything that's been said, for instance, within this framework, it would effectively not really be saying anything. There would not really be, at least in my mind, a discernible meaning. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe some kind of overarching meaning could be sort of provisionally articulated post facto, although of course from this perspective that would be kind of fatally partial, fatally incomplete. However, there's no real problem with this transient meaning that seems to experientially exist in the course of saying things. While things are being said, it kind of seems like they relate to other things being said. So there's some kind of meaning there. Even if it's not necessarily relating to anything outside of itself. And then of course, maybe in another sense it is, or maybe in a sense it's suggesting some kind of meta meaning that this process itself, the long duration, the whole amalgamation of it, the idea, or the rough something that's roughly sensed over the long course of this, potentially is something that could or could not be well articulated in a shorter group of words. I tend to strongly think not. But then again, even this itself, even this whole thing, still seems basically infinitely far away from articulating what it would be articulating, and therefore anything else that anybody else says is equally far away from it. and by implication equally close to it, or equally it itself, which is not anything. But I still have a lot of time to go. I still have a lot of time to fill. And so, like, I judge talking about this sort of thing, talking about the fact that I still have a lot of time to fill, temporarily judge that as being undesirable. Because it seems dumb. Or that it seems actually it's that the problem with it actually is that it has a mildly negative tone. And now I can what it seems like I can do is willfully adjust my tone to be one that I don't perceive as negative. I'm just gonna go ahead and not even examine what I just said about, willfully doing that. I'm just gonna not even delve into that question of free will if I can avoid it. In fact, it seems like just a perfectly legitimate tactic at this point to take on a stance of avoiding investigating anything or avoiding attempting to approach truth whatsoever. Although now that I think of it, maybe it's in some ways also impossible to avoid that, as in like when I said that and then I thought about what the word truth means. Its specificity kind of broke down and just kind of dissipated into all of reality and all of potentiality, such that in a sense, like in a certain sense, you could not like get closer or farther away from truth, no matter what you try to do. I mean, in a certain sense, that's not really true, what I said. But then that just kind of goes to illustrate the point. I think. And while I, for some reason, decided that it was not desirable to exhibit a negative tone, even though honestly the negative tone was undergirded by a position of delightful detachment and bemusement, a sort of different perspective on the idea of having a tone at all. For some reason, I also have been finding it somewhat distasteful to have like a jovial tone. Or like a very joking tone for some reason seems distasteful to me. And you know, here I'm just like at the point of just kind of like flippantly remarking upon tastes and distastes, which seems distasteful to me. But I guess the only alternative that implies is some form of rigor. But the standards of which I think I would find difficult to take seriously, as in the arbitrariness of the rules of the rigor. But here I am, seemingly abiding by some rules that I'm recognizing as arbitrary, but in a certain sense, I'm most well positioned to recognize this arbitrariness from within the bounds of following these rules. Know what I'm saying? So within the boundaries of the rules, I'm best positioned to perceive the arbitrariness of the rules, kind of, we could say, in the same manner that it's only kind of like within the boundaries of my individuated perspective, within those limitations of that individuated self, that I'm able to kind of perceive both like the potentiality of other forms of individuation and other forms of subjectivity, and and also to like, yeah, kind of perceive the arbitrariness, as it were, of the boundaries of myself. As in, like, just for example, it's like when I can think that I was born into a certain family and had certain interactions that I didn't really control or cause, but that have, all those interactions with the world have completely shaped who I am. And it's like it just as easily could have been completely different. There's this specificity that and arbitrariness that's like yeah, if I was born in some different situation and had a different set of circumstances, I would be a serial killer, or I would be a finance banker, or I'd be like a guru, or I'd be dead, or an ant, or whatever. I mean, I'm probably starting to lose some of the continuity of my attentional facilities here. Maybe you have begun to notice this, where and on one hand, like I can perceive this shift. That is, like, maybe you perceive that some of the things that I'm saying start to take on a slightly more flippant tone, and start to maybe like just kind of jump around from topic to topic more freely. It's like a little bit less focused, and I mean, from my subjective point of view, I might attribute that to kind of the like the state of mind that has been reached through attentiveness to something, really anything, any train of thought, just kind of like continuing it on and on and on, and like achieving like a would-be penetration, but it's really just a penetration into nothing. Like to the extent that I realized there was never any penetration, because there wasn't anything to penetrate into. And so it all kind of, whatever might be achieved here is also just the same as stupidity. And so it's like being in a state where let's just say like the perceived utility of continuously pursuing trains of thought has been dissipated, that perception of utility. And so there's like in my thinking, I'm just feel less attached to pursuing one thing, because I don't feel as if it is going to be rewarding of something, but at the same time I can also think that, like, okay, this like what we could sort of frame as a freedom of thinking, of jumping around kind of without worrying about jumping around mentally, is the reward. And you know, it's like I could frame this as having a certain lightness to it, a lightheartedness to it, or unburdenedness to it, which, you know, could have some kind of relative truth to it, but is also kind of like not ultimately real or true. Not actually, there's no actual unburdening or actual like freedom. Like these are all kind of like dualistic terms. What was I getting at? Oh yeah, that so it's like, in one sense, I could kind of explain this somewhat more dispersed and scattered type of attention as being a result of what the process of attention yielded. That but then one could also just as easily suggest, postulate, propose something from a more type of like materialist perspective, that I'm just tired, and that maintaining long attention on specific things like requires certain metabolic resources, and that those metabolic resources are dwindling, as it were. And I would kind of say that both explanations have equal merit. And then I can also look back and on this this current topic that I'm on and say, oh well, I did just kind of like maintain a thread for several sentences there about this one subject that is the sort of like dual explanations for the state of things, and then I can be like, well, I can also interpret what's been going on as attentive and focused, as in I can alternately kind of like frame my recent experience as being as having continuity and still you know, still maintaining this focus on examining this experience, and still actually exhibiting some reasonable degree of articulateness. And so it's like it's as if I'm realizing that I can't even cease to frame things, and can't even cease to kind of like erect these provisional realities. And even notwithstanding the fact that I am kind of like continuously seeing through each one, I mean, and then of course there's probably plenty of provisional realities that I'm erecting that I don't see through, and of course I'm not aware of them because I'm not seeing through them. I mean, so currently in my mind, like, whether this practice is rigorous or completely unrigorous is kind of a meaningless distinction. As is the question of whether anything that I'm saying is meaningful or meaningless. Like, meaningful and meaningless are just aspects of each other. I mean, I don't know if that means anything. I feel tempted to like spout out little gems of propositional knowledge, but then in the spirit that propositional knowledge is like just an aspect of like total chaos. But then, you know, like what's remaining, like, kind of ridiculously consistent right now, what seems ridiculously consistent is of like everything that I'm saying, everything that I find myself saying, I immediately realize as occupying one half of a duality. and the resolution of these dualities, like always kind of like leading towards paradox. And then that seems to have a certain kind of consistency to it. Which kind of like suggests a certain, like the consistency suggests a certain kind of order, but then like the only order that I'm talking about is the consistency of paradox. Which, you know, you could also kind of substitute the word chaos or disorder. I can hardly imagine that you're possibly like following me in any way. Like I don't feel like I'm even following what I'm saying myself. But then in a certain way, I am following it in that it all has like followed each other. Everything that I'm saying. Like I've just kind of been thinking as I think and talking. And it feels like a deep confusion, but like not in a bad way. Really not in a bad way. Like it all feels like very like deeply confusing and really beautiful. And even though I said before, it's like maybe I still do kind of find it distasteful to speak in any kind of tone that's like reverent or in awe or whatever, or really anything that's like kind of like unbalanced, uncritical, positive. Distasteful or not, that's sort of how I feel about all this. It's weird to say it, like at this moment it's kind of strange, but how in some sense I would say that it kind of feels like the goodness is more fundamental than any badness. Or perhaps maybe like a better way to say that would be something like that. Actually, I don't really know. Like I was gonna say that that like goodness is just like synonymous with that which is most fundamental, or that which is most eternal, or something. Like goodness defined as what's fundamental or eternal. But then again, the spirit of what I've been saying sort of implies that there's nothing that's fundamental, or nothing like extant enough to accurately be referred to as eternal. But all of that emptiness to which like all of this is kind of referring to also kind of feels to me like openness. Like a pleasing absence of boundaries, even though I also realize that like that emptiness like experienced from the other end of it is like kind of like horror and pain, and you know, like what you would get from like a bad trip or something, of being like existentially eviscerated, that is. But then it's like once that evisceration has taken place, then you're kind of out in the open in a free way to like rematerialize in a creative way. Which, you know, from this perspective, it's like saying, you know, the bad shit is actually part of the good. But I know also this doesn't make ultimate sense, you know. Of course not. But hey, I'm just filling time with words. That's why I'm saying these things. Because I told myself I would fill this time with words. So I'm just sticking to that plan. How much time we got? I mean, you're excused if you want to go. I still gotta continue on here for a few more minutes. I still gotta finish my shift. And you're free to remain here with me or go and do as you please. I'm still having to choose what to say. And I thought, is it really completely arbitrary what I say? In which case, go with what seems easiest to say. And I thought to myself, why not simply describe your surroundings and, my physical surroundings, and then that just didn't draw to me. It didn't seem like what was at all relevant. Like even so I recognized, like, in the action of describing my surroundings, of course I would be somewhat arbitrarily framing things with my choice of words and what to emphasize and what to omit, of course, whatever. But apparently what actually presented itself as more relevant was for me to describe this series of thoughts that occurred that led to me sort of describing my process of choosing what to say, which in some sense has been the basis for a lot of what I have said already. But it's kind of interesting to me that it seems like even that strategy could just yield like infinite variation. It's like an infinite way to just say what you're thinking at any given moment, and then that process itself is shaping the next moment. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good. As in, I kind of wonder, is like all this like metaphysical shit that I get into, is that kind of like straying from what's most immediate? It sort of seems like I always get into some shit like that. Just talking about what reality is, and always talking about the relationship between objective and subjective, and what time is, and etc., etc., etc. It's like, is that the type of is that like naturally occurring when I stick with this process of just like continuously speaking, or because at least in my experience, it does seem like it flows from the way that I'm describing my own thought process, like flow, like seems to usually flow into a type of like metaphysical speaking that exhibits some continuity in its themes, but that nonetheless, like almost inevitably, like in this process of doing this for 4 hours, it's like I do almost always experience some sense of discovery, at least at some point towards the end. Like it's like my reality just feels like very open. Like I tend to feel this very like refreshing permeability or something to what sort of in retrospect looks like a congested self. Although I realize that's just hindsight. I wasn't necessarily feeling before I did this like I'm a congested self or something. I don't think I was necessarily feeling like that, although just kind of in comparison, in retrospect, it kind of seems that way. It's like if in the alternate universe in which I didn't come and walk and talk, I can imagine I'd be fine. I'd be completely fine. But of course we know that this, as explained earlier, this alternate universe idea is bullshit. Or is it the case that this isn't some rigorous process at all, but just my pure subjectivity, kind of indulgently jerking off intellectually. Is that the case? And I'm just kind of like repeating my personal beliefs about reality that have been instilled in me by various things I've heard or read. And I would kind of think, to some extent, both are true. Like judging by the regularity of the themes of the ideas that I tend to get into, there's probably some truth to saying that I'm just indulgently intellectually jerking off over and over again, but then also at the same time I can't deny the shift in the quality of my experience that this seems to engender. And like at least my subjective feeling of thought being in some relative sense like liberated. Or the subjective feeling of getting some higher perspective on my own thinking than I might otherwise have had. But then of course, like, that's also kind of like just a relative way of saying things, as like I don't actually believe in like these higher or lower perspectives as, you know, but like for example, it's like relativistically, like I can say that I can look back at this most recent analysis of my own thinking, and like the comparing of two explanations of what I'm doing, two descriptions of what I'm doing, one of them being a rigorous process through which my thinking and insight are lifted up to some higher point, and then conversely just intellectually jerking off for a long time.
Because you can do a lot of changes the way you're.
And then I could kind of remark that the sort of perspectival wherewithal of holding both of those perspectives could be a result, a desired result of this process, you know, like indicative of the like indicative of a relatively higher perspective relative to those two viewpoints on their own. Like the ability to compare and hold both of them could be said to be a relatively higher one, but of course that's relative. Also could also be explained in terms of simply like another reinforcing aspect of like some rigidly held beliefs that I'm intellectually jerking off again. Anyhow, let me see what time it is. I think I got a few more minutes to go. It's interesting that I would say that like my adherence to the framework, as in like my the more that I commit to filling these 4 hours with talking, there's some it affords some kind of perspective with which I can kind of like compare all the different things that I say and ways that I say them, and different tones and emotional valences, and like, for example, and then maybe like the different physiological states that that underpin those emotional valences, and the tones with which I say things, and the energy with which I say things, and in some sense, even though there's so much variety with all of those things, I can at the same time perceive a sameness to all of it, or that it's all of its difference is like of a type, and that its difference implies a certain equivalence, or just more generally of experience, like the variety of experience that occurs within the framework. I'm sort of, the framework and the repetition of it and the duration of it helps me to perceive the kind of overarching and consistent qualities of experience. Although it's not exactly qualities, it's like to get a little closer to like getting perspective on the phenomena of experience itself. Just for example, like the difference of feeling energetic or tired, or like a relative amount of energy and conviction versus the lack thereof in something that I'm saying, or the differences in how much like attentional resources I feel like I have, or how much effort I feel like I have to expend in order to keep talking about something or keep thinking about something. Underneath all of that, like what is common to it all, in some sense. What is all this variety an aspect of? I guess like if I was going to try to sum this all up, or try to sum up the meta utility of this process, then one version of it could go along those lines. Anyhow, I think I've lost precise count of the time, but I think that we're more or less around the 4-hour mark. And so thank you for being who you are. Okay, bye.